I want to ask you this as well. So obviously America has been sanctioning, Russia pretty heavily on this. When the sanctions first hit, there was somewhere in the neighborhood of 1.5 billion rubles that went into Bitcoin. We've seen tens of millions of dollars go to Ukraine in aid in crypto. And, Putin has said, I think last week, he said that anyone wants to do business with us, they have to pay in rubles, and he's got some leverage because even Western European countries are buying oil from him and natural gas. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering, at some point, does Putin just say Russia is moving to Bitcoin, like the way El Salvador did? I mean, it seems like if you read the white paper, the Satoshi white paper, like this is what it was. Bitcoin specifically, not the altcoins, but Bitcoin specifically was designed to do this. And Joe Biden himself last year said Bitcoin's bad because it limits America's ability to sanction people. Yeah. It's like,
yes, that's what makes it bad.
Yeah. So, I mean, how do you see Russia adopting Bitcoin across the board? Or, how do you see the economic side of this play out?
That's an interesting question because it was just a few months ago that the Russian government was actually looking at an all-out ban on cryptocurrency. And that's something that not necessarily Putin was considering, but I know the Russian central bank that they were heavily considering. And then you had everything break out in Canada with the truckers, where the Canadian government came in and they said that they were going to start targeting and freezing people's bank accounts. And then you had everything with Russia and all of the sanctions related to that. So it's been interesting to kind of watch that turnaround with the Russian government now saying, well, wait a second, maybe we don't want to go this route. Now, in terms of them actually moving forward to make Bitcoin legal tender, I don't know if I see that just yet, but I am curious to see how it plays out with, some of the statements that we've heard from the government. It's been really interesting to watch and see. Over the last week or so, they've talked about it and they've said, well, for those quote unquote friendly, because they're kind of dividing countries up into friendly and unfriendly right now. And they're saying for the friendly countries, you can trade with us in whatever you want. If it's your national currency, we'll even consider Bitcoin, that sort of thing. And so I think with that rhetoric, that of course may be something that they would consider. Now, the question then becomes what that is going to look like when Russia does continue to move forward with this digital ruble, because right now, digital currencies, central bank-backed digital currencies rather, are all the rage. And of course, those central banks don't love cryptocurrencies because that's the decentralized version of what they're trying to roll out and what they're trying to get everyone to adopt. So as soon as they do get that Russian or that digital ruble on track, then it'll be interesting to see kind of how crypto friendly they are. But as for right now, when they're watching countries like the US and countries across the EU announcing unprecedented sanctions, it does not surprise me at all that they're sitting there saying, well, hey, why not give crypto a try? This is something we'd consider.
Yeah, it'll be, I'm curious to see how this plays out, because I think there's also another, to talk about the American side here. So the American, Biden and the government and the Western media is like, oh, Putin's all isolated. And it's like, really? He's got China and India on his side, which are the two biggest countries in the world population wise. One of the, maybe the biggest economy in China. I'm wondering, has Biden basically painted America into a corner here, where financially, because at some point, even Western Europe might go, because I remember I covered this on my show a couple of months ago before the invasion of, Biden was saying, well, we don't want Germany to have that Russian pipeline. We want Germany to buy our oil, which is more expensive, our natural gas, which is more expensive. So at some point, does even Western Europe go, well, we're better off doing business with Russia? And the way China, its Silk Road Initiative, I mean, China just builds metro, train stations and stadiums. I mean, they're just building all this stuff. America goes in and sanctions and bombs the shit out of everybody. And at some point, people are going to go, I think we'll go with them,
I was going to say, that's exactly what we're seeing right now with, I think, one of the most interesting examples of this has been really Southeast Asia, because the Biden administration came out at the beginning of this year and they released some 19-page document where basically they said that they were going to work on their ties with countries in Southeast Asia. And their way of doing that was to say, we want to, so that they get closer to the US than they are to China. So it's been like literally less than a month since that document was released. They were supposed to have this big summit with the Association for Southeast Asian Nations. And instead, yesterday, Biden had a bilateral summit with Singapore. And the reason that he only met with Singapore was because that's the only country in Southeast Asia that basically followed Washington's demands on condemning Russia and imposing sanctions against Russia. So the other 9 countries in that alliance have all kind of taken a step back here. They've wanted to appear more neutral. And part of the reason is because they have strong economic ties to Russia and at the same time to China. So they're looking at this situation and they're realizing, well, if we condemn Russia, if we sanction Russia, that hurts our economies, but it doesn't really give us any benefit other than that they get to go to some summit here in Washington, D.C. and Biden, they get to have a press conference with him, basically. So I agree that it's like the U.S. has had years and years of being able to essentially boss everyone around to bomb whatever country they want. And they continue to act like that. But the problem is that now, by going after a country like Russia, that is known for its natural resources, that supplies so much all around the world, now what they're doing is they're harming the economies of the countries that would just follow the United States lead for the sake of following its lead. And when it comes to, what we've seen in the European Union, Germany has been very vocal about the fact that if they do what the US wants and tomorrow they cut off all energy imports from Russia, their economies would crash completely because they rely on Russia for around 40% of their natural gas supplies. So even though they've kind of backed off the Nord Stream 2 pipeline for now, and they're taking a step back and basically saying, okay, we won't certify it now, at the same time, they're not nearly as quick to say, yeah, let's just cut off all of our supplies, because the US does not have a good answer for what it would look like if countries across Europe don't rely on Russia. The US will say, oh, we'll give you supplies, or you can get supplies from Dubai. But none of those answers are going to lessen energy prices at all, given the fact that right now they're already skyrocketing. And so you're right, it really does paint the US into a corner, and yet they're doing all of this to themselves.
Yeah, they're doing this. And I'm just wondering here the housing crisis of 2008, there was Dodd-Frank, which is like a Band-Aid on a shotgun wound. There was no real regulation. So it can happen again. We're already seeing all of these bubbles that were created before COVID that are now starting, that are not, but even looking potentially worse. We've done the printing of all these stimulus plans. We've printed trillions of dollars, which I understand some of it needed to get to help some people out, but most of it went to Wall Street. And, we're seeing the inflation already, that they're saying, oh, it's 10% inflation. Well, I don't think anyone who made that report has gone to a grocery store. It's like 20 to 30% inflation. I don't know. I literally don't know how they're coming up with this math. But on top of all the things you just talked about, isn't also America just on the brink of like a bad financial collapse, like run on the banks type of chaos? A housing collapse, aren't we like on the brink of that?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's crazy when you think back to 2020, when there were recession warnings then, and then the Federal Reserve came in and they said, you know what, we're just going to print trillions upon trillions of dollars and we're going to prop up our economy during historic lockdowns. And then they continued those policies for the next 2 years. And so now that puts us in a situation where, the Fed has sat there and not only have they lied about what the actual inflation numbers are, but they've used words like transitory to swear that those numbers won't be that high for too long. And then they had to come back around at the end of last year and kind of say, okay, maybe we weren't as right about that. But even now, they're saying that those inflation numbers are supposed to be cut in half by the end of this year. And yet we're in a situation where we're looking at how many supply chain shortages we've already seen. And now we're looking at even more as the US sanctions Russia and hits on things like fertilizer and wheat supplies and those little things that may, or I guess they may seem little, but still have a massive impact on the overall supply chain. And so, yeah, now we're in a position where the Federal Reserve is kind of saying, okay, like we'll raise interest rates, we'll reduce our balance sheet, we'll back off of asset purchases, all of the good things that you want to hear. But then the question becomes, one, how long are they going to let that happen? If there is some sort of a crash in the stock market, are they going to go right back to propping everything back up? And then, of course, what is the result of that? Because we've been on the heels of the government kind of propping things up over and over again. And it just creates this house of cards where we're now in the position of wondering how much longer we're going to be able to stand this, especially as the US tries to really sanction the whole world, but mainly Russia and China.
We're trying to sanction the whole world. I mean, literally.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I've just seen so much crazy stuff happen just in the last month of like, you know, America like even in Venezuela, right? Another oil country. We said, oh, Juan Guaido is the new president. And was like, what? Who's this guy? And then a couple of weeks ago, Biden was like, oh, I need to talk to the President Maduro about getting some oil reserves. And it's like, oh, now Maduro's.
Yeah. Funny how that works. Yeah. And you know what's funny too, and this did not get a lot of media coverage at all, but when the US decided that it was going to go after Venezuela and it was going to cut them off and force their people to accept Juan Guaido, well, in 2020, the US saw a record number of oil imports from Russia. And so now it's as if they've flip-flopped it and they've said, okay, wait a second. Now Russia's the bad guy of the year. We don't want their supplies. Now we're going to go to Venezuela. And and yet those policies are still in place. Those sanctions are still in place. So they're going to Venezuela and they're saying, hey, we need your supplies and we'll work things out later, so to speak. And it makes me wonder where Juan Guaido is at. He's not doing too well with ruling that country.
Yeah, I guess the puppet president just his phone was broken. That's why they called Maduro or something like that. It's just like, so it's probably just a clerical error. That's all it was.
Not the CIA's best work.
Yeah. Well, like, I mean, if America just, I don't know, like, I don't want to be like too like apocalyptic, but I just see America just painting itself into more and more problems financially and like acting the way empires act, which is spreading itself too thin militarily, getting itself tangled up in all this stuff. I mean, we've been pushing this. I mean, there's interviews from 2014 and 2015 of like, Eastern European scholars saying we're pushing Russia into this war. I mean, like we've been trying to do this for a while. Yeah. I mean, is this the beginning of the end of the United States? I mean, like, I wonder, like, is the United States in its current form going to be around in 5 to 10 years? Or is California going to break off? Is Texas going to, are we just going to get balkanized? Like, I don't know.
Texas is going to be out of here before anybody else. California is going to be jealous, I'm sure. Texas has had their independence party, quote unquote, ready for this for years now. So they're ready. But no, I don't know that it'll be a 5 to 10 year kind of thing, but I do think that what we're seeing right now is this really powerful shift where for so long the US has called the shots. For so long, the dollar has been the world reserve currency, and they have abused that left and right. And so you've got countries like China, like India, like Russia that have been working to rely less and less on the US dollar for years now. This is something that they've already been in the process of doing. And what they're realizing is that they can kind of look to each other and say, okay, well, you also have been under heavy threats for the United States. So why don't you and I work together? And all of a sudden what that does is that takes the US as really the bully that it has become, and it lessens its power around the world. And it's also been notable to see in the Middle East, where now leaders there are getting together and working together amongst themselves, because they're realizing that all of a sudden the US is not paying as much attention to their region anymore after 20 years and however many trillions of dollars it poured into the region. And now those Middle East leaders are actually complaining, and they're complaining about the double standard that they see, which is that the United States is calling on the entire world, saying the whole world needs to suffer, and they need to suffer for the quote unquote Ukrainian people. And you've got people across the Middle East that are saying, well, wait a second, our people have been suffering for 2 decades now, and no one did anything about that. The United States didn't care when it was our civilians, and now all of a sudden they think that they say that they care about Ukraine. I mean, the US is kind of, it's showing its true colors. So I don't know if it'll be the next decade or two, but I think that if the US continues with the path that it's on right now, the results are not going to be good down the road.
Yeah, it's not a question of if, it's just a when. That's the only, to me, it just seems like it's a when and what it'll look like, but like it's coming no matter what. Well, Rachel, we really appreciate you taking time out to join us today. I know it's been a crazy couple of weeks for you. Where anything in the works, or where can people, are you going to be doing other stuff, or where you have a YouTube show or anything like that people can come follow?
Yeah. So I'm actually on Rockfin. I'm still trying to get my Rockfin channel up off the ground. I do weekly live streams every Tuesday and still working on that. So they're welcome to follow me there. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, you name it. I am wherever they will have me, essentially, even if I'm labeled as Russian state media like I am on Twitter, but I'm still there and still tweeting away. So thank you so much for having me on the show. I appreciate it.
And folks, it's another reason to go to rockfin.com and join, because there's all like lead camps on there. I mean, Abby Martin, there's amazing people on there, and they don't censor anybody. It's blockchain. They pay us in cryptocurrency. It's really the future, and there's no censorship at all. So it's another reason to go to Rockfin. So, well, Rachel, thank you so much for coming on the show. We'll definitely have you back.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
All right. Have a great day. Hey, everybody. Thanks for watching. We are still in our 9th month of demonetization from YouTube. So support what we're doing at patreon.com/Graham Elwood or rockfin.com/Graham Elwood, which is a blockchain cryptocurrency platform. It's free to sign up, and there's a premium level at $10 a month. And for that, you get everybody on the platform's premium content. Myself, Lee Camp, Ron Placone, Jimmy Dore, Whitney Webb, Kim Iverson, Abby Martin, and many, many others. You can also support what we're doing at Venmo at Graham-Elwood, and go to GrahamElwood.com. We have a PayPal button and a PO box. I also have crypto wallets, which are all in the show notes. Thanks for supporting what we do.